My golden child sister's business received the $75,000 education money that was bequeathed to her by my grandfather. The truth has come out, and karma has hit me hard after I sued them and been booted out. I am 18 years old, and I am going through a terrible patch. My life prior was far from easy. Narcissistic parents and their golden kid have made my life difficult from the start. I have a 24-year-old sister named Rachel. She's the source of all my problems. My folks have had an axe to grind with Rachel ever since I can remember. Because of them, I was never allowed to have a carefree youth. I wouldn't call my sister a bully, but she is cunning and quick to seize opportunities. She wasted little time taking advantage of our parents' sentiments to achieve her goals. No, I don't hold anything against her. This is how my folks have achieved it. They welcomed her first. Of course, they hold her in high regard, but I am also their daughter. Everyone has a favorite child, I'm sure. Up until you stop making the other person feel unloved, it's alright. So that's how my folks handled it. Added misery to my existence. In this place, I felt like an afterthought. Since her garments were still in their original, unused condition, I often got to wear them instead of her old, worn-out ones. Since my sister's toys were still in fine shape, I figured there was no reason to buy new ones when I could just play with ours. They were afraid I would look terrible in front of Grandpa and the other visitors, so I didn't get a new outfit until Christmas. I used to receive a single pair of shoes, a dress, and other accessories for Christmas, but my sister could have as many as she wanted, so I could avoid social pressure to conform. Mom often told me not to be impatient whenever I begged her to stop doing something. You will be the recipient of your sister's belongings next year. Yes, I understand. But in a used goods form. I used to buy into their reasoning when I was a youngster, but I started making a big deal out of it as I got older. I was either grounded for misbehavior or informed that we couldn't afford new sets. My mom never once asked me what I wanted for supper or made the meal that I always wanted. My sister was the center of attention. The food is tailored to my sister's preferences, whether it's for a holiday, Thanksgiving, or any other occasion. At one point, I was so rebellious that I refused to finish the meal and even walked out of the dining room. I had to do the dishes for a whole week and apologize to everyone, or else I would have been grounded and starving. Telling my stories of sadness is exhausting, but this is the reality. I don't understand why my parents, especially my mom, treat me this way. Her sister is the reason for it. My mother inherited the traits of narcissism from her parents, who suffered from them. Do you perceive the paradox? Two of mom's siblings before her. She claims her parents were quite indulgent with her and the younger sister. Because mom had to deal with prejudice from her own parents, she chose to take care of the older girl instead of the younger one. As far as I can tell, my mom takes after my sister in the same manner she wished someone had treated her when she was little. Feelings like those are familiar to you. I began spending my summers with my grandfather after I became so bitter toward my sister and parents by the time I graduated from elementary school. I had no one who loved me more than he did. My grandpa had strong feelings toward my mom. His ability to perceive my mom's absurd conduct was commendable. I suppose that explains his unwavering support throughout my life. While I was a student in elementary school, my grandfather extended an invitation for me to vacation at his farm. My heart sank with relief. I had never felt so carefree and at ease before. Everything I asked for was granted by Grandpa. Admittedly, I took advantage of his adoration to the fullest. My parents never gave in to my requests for the things I wanted as a child, including clothing, Barbies, doll homes, video games, and everything else I could think of. The time we spent together on his property, surrounded by nature, was wonderful. In addition to his tiny stable of 4 or 5 horses, he had a poultry farm. His days were devoted to them. In the several days that he was there, life was full of joy. Returning home has always been a chore for me. I wanted to stay with my grandpa throughout high school, so I pushed to attend a school close by him. I had to put up with my grandfather beginning in my freshman year of high school since my parents were eager to get rid of me. It was necessary for us both. He was in his twilight years and in need of assistance, and I wanted a break from my controlling family. My grandfather became ill while I was a junior in high school. Perhaps he had it in his mind that his time had come. He then informed everyone of his intentions by calling them all. 2 of my uncles were given his farm and stable by him. He left my dad $150,000 in cash, with $75,000 set up for my education expenses. He coerced me into committing to finishing my degree. Because Dad just received a few grand while everyone else got farms and properties, Mom was unhappy. Dad had already sold his portion of the property to settle his debt and launch his company, as Grandpa pointed out. My grandfather passed away right before I began my last year of high school. To this day, I have never felt such sorrow. There is no one I can rely on now. My folks insisted that I return home with them. That was a bad experience. That was really disappointing to me. They also do. I requested my parents to give me the $75,000 that my grandfather left me as my graduation day draws closer. Applying to colleges is something I need to do. The issue arose at that point. The moment I brought up my college plans or asked about my finances, they would look at me funny. Or completely disregard me. When I finally had enough, I demanded to know what was wrong and where my money was. At that point, she revealed that my sister had received the funds for her business from them. Oh my God. I was going to use that money for my education expenses. They insist it's not a huge problem and that I should just wait a year since I'm not old enough to start college yet. I introduced myself and asked how I can be considered youthful for college while my peers my age are being accepted. Despite their best efforts to reason with me, they are now begging for an extra year to pay for my college expenses. I asked why the golden child couldn't just hold off on starting her business for a year. A year couldn't be wasted on me. I am unsure of the steps to take to get my hands on the funds. Do you have any recommendations? First update. A lot has transpired throughout the past 3 months. My folks had begged me to hold off for a year. I was the one that dissented and went after them for the cash. They became angry with me and accused me of being selfish and cruel. Gaslighting is what they're calling it. This isn't all, though. My sister Rachel has launched an offensive to make me look awful. My cousin dropped the bombshell that Rachel is spreading the rumor that I'm envious of her business and trying to get money out of her. I lost it. I warned Mom that I would expose their decision to have their worthless daughter utilize my college fund in defiance of Grandpa's wishes if she refused to hand over the money. Do you want to go to that level? Mom said in her irate voice. Get a job and pay the rent. We'll feed you. Figure out how much we'll be spending on you over the next 18 years. The score is tied. Like, why the fuck? I fought back. Their eldest daughter, who is 24 years old, and has a kid from a previous marriage, is still receiving support from them, and here they are, being cruel and taking my money. Their golden kid brought dishonor upon them, yet they are still having her back, even if I have always gotten high marks. My sister was not mentioned in my writing. My sister became pregnant while I was still living with my grandfather. Her boyfriend had an affair. It had already been there for too long by the time she decided to try it. My folks had to hear about it from her. They felt helpless in the face of their disappointment. Because her mother is a devout Christian, she was able to marry her lover. Neither of them wanted to tie the knot, but Rachel's mother had given her little alternative. In any case, her partner was a total dweeb. He was reluctant to tie the knot and shoulder the child's responsibilities, but my parents insisted he do it nevertheless. When my sister had her kid, he left her and the baby. Despite my parents' best efforts, he managed to evade capture since he possessed proof of my sister's mental abuse. This was the basis for his divorce petition. My folks had to take her home with them. Their care for Rachel and her child has been invaluable. When I returned home after Grandpa passed away, I discovered that my sister is out and about, and that it is my mom's responsibility to raise the child. Rachel would leave her child with Mom to take care of when her dad was angry with her. Rachel is busy looking for a job on her own, so she's out. Rachel's mother rushed to her rescue. No, it is incorrect. There were several occasions when I caught glimpses of her skulking with boys in the parks and cafes surrounding. She's having a hard time getting a good one because she dropped out of school. Am I really bothered? After being unsuccessful in her job search, she persuaded her parents to help her establish a company. My parents continued to be by her side through it all. They handed her the cash without consulting me first. I had no idea how to get my money back other than to ask them until I made this article. When they refused to give me the money again, I threatened to sue them for disobeying my grandfather's bequest. Their complexions become pallid. They realized they couldn't take advantage of me anymore. I began standing up to their exploitation the moment I returned from Grandpa's house, and when I threatened to sue them for money, they completely lost it. For them, it was incredible. I had matured beyond my childish, naive self. With a notepad in hand, Mom jotted down the total amount they had spent on me each month. Seriously, between my name, the school tuition, and my Christmas attire, that woman spent a quarter of the budget on me. Her final comment: "Forget about the $75,000. You owe us $200,000. Left me in wonder as she doodled it. Please make payment to us before requesting your $75K. I became furious with my mom and rushed out of the home after we had a violent dispute. I waited for my uncle to leave the block for a while before taking a bus to my grandpa's house. Along with grandpa's lawyer's contact information, I requested his diary. I gave him a call and filled him in on what was going on. I politely requested his assistance. As far as he was concerned, it was his duty to distribute the $75,000 that my grandpa had bequeathed to me. He assured me that my parents will receive a formal notice demanding payment from them. If they do not, he threatened to sue them. That's great news. Within a week, they will receive the notification. I'm relieved to get assistance, but I'm also anxious about how my parents will respond when they receive the notification. The second update will be shorter, and I pray to God that they don't do anything bad with me. I wanted to inform you all that you were absolutely correct in predicting that my parents will scold me. For what was to come, I had mentally prepared myself. My friend and I discussed the possibility of living in the condo together. I got a job working part-time at a cafe. They gave me some leftover food at closing time, but the money is extremely cheap. The warning didn't even arrive until the day after I had packed all of my possessions. After getting the lawyer's notice, my mom dumped me, as I predicted. After she beat me, she tossed all of my belongings out of the house. I should have gotten out of there sooner and let them have their fun evicting me. Because I subsisted on their money while plotting my betrayal and retaliation, she likened me to a snake that they had been feeding in our backyard. They gave me no choice but to rant about it. I refused to let their egotism put my professional and personal life in jeopardy. My parents were given 1 month by the lawyer to reply to the notice. They are on the verge of crossing the temporal barrier. Due to Rachel's abusive phone call, which caused me to feel bad about causing trouble for the family, I believe they are not taking it seriously. I don't have the financial means to take legal action against my parents, she added, and they refused to pay me a dime. I kept my cards hidden from her. I listened to her out quietly until I finally snapped and ended the call. I brought this up with my attorney, and he assured me that we will be able to sue them if they do not reply by next week. Third update. The fallout from my parents' reaction to my lawsuit was devastating. To be honest, I was reluctant to bring charges against them, but they ultimately forced me to. I was under the impression that the lawyer's notification would be enough, but they chose not to comply with the lawyer's request. I returned home to warn them that if they disobeyed Grandpa's wishes, I would pursue legal action. I was surrounded by my enemies. Flew insults in my direction. I had left a few non-essential things at home with the intention of bringing them later, and my mom even flung things at me. My mom took it out of my closet and threatened to hurt me by shattering it into confetti while I stood in front of her. It appears they were hoping for a ride, but I was there to resolve the issue amicably. When I returned, I instructed my attorney to file criminal charges against them. He was pleased to do it. A state of fear was set upon them upon receipt of the court order. There was no need to go to court, my dad told me over the phone, we could resolve our family issues amicably. Is that so? When I returned home to settle some family business, they became violent and abandoned me with no other option than to leave. The ship has set sail, and now they must adhere to the law. Compromise is not an option for me. Dad put down his weapons and presented his bank account to prove he didn't have that much money, but the judge still wanted him to pay $75 according to Grandpa's bequest. His monthly payment of $10,000 was rejected by my lawyer on the grounds that I require that amount to cover the cost of my college education. According to the attorney's ruling, my dad must cover all of my expenses, including education, housing, and food, up to a maximum of $75,000. If my spending goes beyond that, I'll have to pay the difference. In the event that my spending falls short of $75,000, the remaining balance will be paid by my parents. I didn't particularly enjoy the thought of continuing to rely on him financially, but I had no other option. Actually, Dad, I didn't have 75 grand to donate all at once. Despite my objections, my distraught father pleaded with me and assured me that he would not renege on our agreement. Thus, I consented. However, I warned him that I would sue him and my mother again, this time demanding restitution for the emotional distress I had endured, in the event that they made a fuss about it again. That was his agreement. Mom and Rachel, meanwhile, trailed behind me. Accusations that I am responsible for my parents' hypertension and the embarrassment that has befallen our family as a result of our legal battles have been circulated by Rachel. The irony, then, is this. She was humiliated and shamed when she got knocked up, but I brought dishonor upon myself by just requesting their money. Holy cow. Truthfully, I am no longer concerned. They called me a black sheep, and I suppose that's just how I like it. I apologize for the delay in this update. Transitioning to collegiate life kept me occupied. I was the valedictorian of my high school class. I knew my parents wouldn't show up, so I sent them convocation invitations nonetheless. Dad showed up, which was unexpected. He expressed his pride in me for the first time and appeared satisfied overall. He didn't come to terms with the fact that I was his daughter and needed his love and care until after 18 years and a legal battle. It's irrelevant at this point. I've already moved on. Before relocating to my college residence, I left my job at the cafe. My dad pays for all of my education expenses, including books, housing, and food. Going on, I am completely alone. I got a part-time job close to the university. As an additional source of income, I am tutoring my fellow students in mathematics. In arithmetic, I excel. Impressive, isn't it? In compliance with the court's ruling, Dad has been sending the money with great diligence. While my mom was being cruel to me, some of you wanted to know how my relationship with my dad was doing. Here it is. I never knew my dad. Dad could have looked away from all the wrongdoing that was occurring to me, but he ignored it. My issues went unnoticed, and he never once challenged my mother about her actions. He did what his mother told him. Actually, Dad thought it was a smart move on Mom's part to let me wear my sister's clothes since she was obviously trying to save him money. My dad has always been tight with money, so he's always up for a penny-saving scheme. Thus, you may say that he was always there for Mom in that sense. Also, his reaction to Rachel's surprise pregnancy is something I don't really understand. I have learned what little there is about this from my extended family. Because of how discreetly Rachel's wedding was planned, no one was aware of the exact date. Nobody is immune, including myself. Previously I mentioned that I was staying with my grandpa and couldn't have cared less about what was going on at my house. In case you were wondering how I am doing right now, I am overjoyed. Getting high marks while attending college is my lifelong goal. Since the court case, my connection with my dad has only grown stronger. Eventually, Mom and Rachel acquired their own problems to deal with, but not before they did their thing of complaining and bad-mouthing me, casting me in a villainous light. The police were involved with Rachel's case. They lost the money that they had loaned Rachel. A gaming zone was actually Rachel's cover for her clandestine gambling enterprise. None of my parents were aware of it. The police apprehended her and confiscated all of her belongings when they mistook it for a gambling business. The machinery and tools were all confiscated. My parents bailed her out with the little money she had in her bank account. Because of this, she ultimately receives zero benefits. She had spent my grandpa's hard-earned money in this way. There is no way I could be happier. Honestly, I didn't feel well about going to the corner of the house to retrieve my money from Dad. Rachel didn't spend the money for a good reason, so I'm pleased I fought back. She launched a gambling enterprise that devastated her family. She was kicked out of the house by her dad following that run-in with the police and her stint in prison. Even though Mom attempted to fight for her, Dad ultimately gave her the boot. Rachel or Dad may be it. My mom is unemployed. So, it's clear that she went with Dad and told Rachel to get a job and go. Prior to the revelation of her gambling, Rachel had been successfully manipulating her father emotionally through her child to allow her to reside in the mansion. However, I've now learned that her dad has finally had enough of her BS and has expelled her. The duration of her stay with her pal is anybody's guess. So far, she hasn't asked me for assistance. Do you think she could? She should keep away from me because I will not hesitate to humiliate her more after all the torment she and my mom inflicted on me. It brought tears to my eyes as I read my original post earlier today, before I even started to write this update. At that time, I was in a really difficult position. I had recently lost my grandfather, who was my rock. My parents had stolen his estate. My narcissistic parents had kept me housebound. And I had been refused admission to college. My future was clouded with so much doubt. Darkness and powerlessness were my only perceptions. Many thanks to this group for their encouragement, though. I long for the days of spending time with my grandfather. He is the sole reason I am a college student today. My guardian angel is he. No matter where he is right now, I know he is blessing me. The following story is up next. Tale number 2. My ex-wife has the gall to ask me for money now that she is bankrupt and in debt from the expensive fantasy wedding I never gave her because she cheated on me with Mr. Romantic. When we were both in our mid-20s, my wife, also 49 years old, and I met. Before we chose to date, we were just friends. Although our year-long romance was relatively short in comparison to most relationships, it felt like an eternity when we were in it. I expressed my desire to hold out a bit longer when she brought up the idea of us getting married. I was eventually prepared to pop the question to my then-girlfriend within a few months. We began wedding preparations once she accepted. I should have seen the warning signs at this time, but I didn't. Why? I was completely smitten. Yours really desired a grand wedding, my fiancé. I get that it was an unforgettable event. But I just don't see the use in shelling out $2,000 for what was essentially a single day. She wanted a big ceremony, but I talked her into a smaller, more personal one. Although she appeared okay with it at the moment, I fear that she began to resent me for convincing her to do it as the years and months passed. The problem is that we just did not have the funds for such a lavish ceremony back then. I joked that if we wanted to renew her vows, we could have the fairy tale wedding she always imagined. This made her happy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this resentment was dormant the whole time. Did I think I was the most woozy man alive? No, but I did my best to surprise my wife with thoughtful gestures every now and again to keep the spark alive, and she was well aware of this fact when we were married. Additionally, we were free from the burden of parenthood since we chose not to have any. We were married for over 20 years when we were in our 40s. I planned a romantic evening because things had become old over the last year or two. To top it all off, I wasn't exactly a romantic, so I went to my sister for advice. In the end, it accomplished nothing. My wife claimed to have remained at a friend's place the next day when she finally returned home that night. She reasoned that it would be best to spend the night there since they had been drinking. I decided to trust her since I couldn't see any reason not to. We had a nice meal the following night when I tried again. She said she was too exhausted to engage in sexual activity with me when I attempted to make the first move. Once again, I didn't give it much consideration. Thanks to our hard work, we were able to save up enough money to live the way we did. This pattern persisted until I had to decide whether to trust her naive, unfounded claims any longer. I asked her pals if she was there, but they stepped in to cover for her. No need for me to be startled. Getting down to brass tacks and asking her outright if she was cheating was my only other option. The night I confronted her, she acknowledged everything, which caught me off guard. She came right out and told me she was cheating, and I was shocked. The truth is that I had no idea what to anticipate. She didn't attempt to refute it or tell me I was incorrect, which is what I was expecting. Therefore, I inquired as to the identity of the person and the duration of their involvement. He was a distant relative of a buddy she made along the road. He was very passionate and charming, and they hit it off right away. That was it. I had finally found the one thing I would never be able to accomplish. Despite my best efforts, my wife didn't think I was making enough of an effort. According to her, this man was everything I wasn't and more. On that fateful night, we finalized our marriage and started the divorce proceedings. The divorce was amicable. We decided to divide everything evenly. We would split the proceeds from the sale of the house. To swiftly separate from one another, this appeared to be our best bet. I used the funds we had set aside in the joint account to purchase a condo after the divorce was finalized. I intended to save a good chunk of the remaining cash as a rainy day fund. I also saved up the proceeds from the sale of the house. It would come in handy when you least expected it. It was my ex who ultimately did the complete reverse. With her inheritance, she purchased a mansion that dwarfed the one we shared. I should mention that it was a pretty large wedding that she was preparing when I first got the news. She finally had the wedding of her dreams. My mind kept wandering back to our wedding from long ago. For years, my ex-girlfriend harbored resentment toward me since we were unable to have the wedding she had always dreamed of. I looked at the Facebook photos afterwards, and holy cow, that was a major deal. As humiliating as it is to confess, the prices were astronomical. The amount of money she spent on the entire affair, including the clothing, is mind-boggling. I realized then that I needed to cut ties with my ex-girlfriend and cease fixating on her. Being there with loved ones helped, so I made that a priority. It seemed to me that my ex-girlfriend was engrossed in her latest app. It appears that not everything was perfect. It was revealed to me that they were indebted just 1 year following their marriage. I left my ex with nothing since she used the divorce settlement to buy a costly property and a lavish wedding. Because the app was terrible, my ex was the only breadwinner in that family, even though her work did generate a respectable salary. She mustered the courage to ask if I might give her a loan. I wasn't fooled by my ex-boyfriend's attempts to rehash our 20-year romance and the good times we shared. The fact that she frittered away her whole divorce settlement on useless items is not my concern, I informed her. After we ended our discussion, I got at least 3 more calls and 3 quite unpleasant voicemails from her that evening. I found them hilarious and played them for my friends to see how much she had declined after listening to them. As amused by them as I was, they all agreed. Either my ex-boyfriend was genuinely needy or he had no shame. I have no idea whether she ever thought I would actually hand her the cash. I would never have given anything to her, regardless of how many months had passed since she first contacted me. Never in my life did I feel that hopeless. I wanted to avoid any further communication from her, so I blocked her number that night. We had finished. She strayed on her partner and wanted to spend time with her new romantic interest, an app. I would still be rich now if my ex hadn't been so careless with her finances. It was with much relief that most of my loved ones said their goodbyes. For my sake, I'd like to know if they ever really liked her or if it was more of an act. But it was moot now. My ex-girlfriend was and always will be a part of my history.